Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Two Asian Blokes Podcast, a podcast where we talk about Asian pop culture, movies, TV shows, comic books, anime, music, games, food, whatever we feel like at the time, really. My name is Dan with a H, and with me, as always, my co-host Thavy.
Yeah, g'day everybody. So how's freedom? Did you go party? Did you go clubbing? Did you go karaoke? Did you do whatever?
I've mainly
your new premiers let you
mainly spend my time like going outside to the shops briefly and just being scared of the amount of people around. The only real thing that I want to do is go to the movies, I guess.
Yeah, me too. I want to pay money to see good movies. As I mentioned last time, I spent too much money on supporting garbage movies, which I feel guilty for.
Right.
And there's been plenty of movies I've seen this year where I was like, oh, I wish I saw this in the theater. It would have been so much better.
Suicide Squad?
Yeah, Suicide Squad would have been great in the cinema, especially with friends. It's nice, easy watch.
Jungle Cruise?
Even Jungle Cruise would have been great in the cinema. It's just like easy watch.
What was the last film you saw in the cinema? Was it Snake Eyes?
It was Snake Eyes.
Oh, no.
It was the week we had a week of freedom between lockdowns. I went and saw Snake Eyes.
Nice. Good decision. So, Thavy, maybe you should introduce today's topic since it directly pertains to something that's happening to you.
Well, I guess not going into it too much. I have a condition called keratoconus. Basically, it's something that I acquired many years ago, but it's pretty hard to diagnose until much later in adulthood. But it basically, I'm losing vision in my eyes. I've had it cured on my left eye in a surgery a couple years ago, and I'm going to have an operation on my right eye, which is a cornea transplant, to hopefully restore the vision in my right eye, as I don't have functioning vision in my right eye at the moment. And as a filmmaker, that's not ideal, because I guess you need to see to make movies. But that correlates to the film that we're going to talk about today, which is the Hong Kong Singaporean production The Eye, which was released in 2002, directed by Danny Pang and Oxide Pang.
Oxide Pang? Is that one of their names? Oxide?
Yeah, it's spelt that way.
Oh.
I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it properly, but I just read it as Oxide Pang. It just sounds cool.
Pretty cool.
Sounds very diesel punk.
Yeah.
Oxide Pang.
Sounds like a bad rapper. A bad Asian rapper.
Yo, I'm Oxide Pang. Noodles and rice. But yeah, the story is about a woman who receives a cornea transplant, and from receiving the cornea transplant, she was formerly blind but can now see, but she ends up seeing more than she bargains for. And given into the horror theme that we're going for in October,
Spooktober,
she begins to see ghosts. And yeah, that's basically the story, is her like dealing with the fact that she can see ghosts.
Yeah, so this one flew under my radar. I mean, I've never personally been a big horror fan.
This one was part of the big boom of like Asian horror back in the early 2000s, and different in it's a Hong Kong horror, but
it did eventually get an American remake in 2008, which we will talk about as well. So just dropping a spoiler alert for both versions of The Eye, in case you haven't seen them and want to. You've been warned.
I saw this movie quite a long time ago. I think when I saw it first, to me, this was one of the weaker films of the Asia horror boom.
And you're comparing it to films like The Ring, Ringu.
Yeah. But that being said, it is a good film. And having literally just watching the remake, I appreciate it more.
Okay.
Like, when did you hear about this movie?
I think I heard about it when the American remake came out. At the time of that big boom of Asian horror being converted and remade into US horror, I didn't know much about Asian cinema in general, so I tended to watch the American remakes first and be more aware of the American remakes. And then, I had always heard, oh, this is a remake of a Japanese film, or this is a remake of a South Korean film or a Hong Kong film. But, I kind of didn't bother to go back and watch the Asian counterparts, because, like I said, horror is not really my jam in general.
Did you like this movie, The Eye?
So the Hong Kong one, yeah, it was okay. It kind of follows the same tone and pacing as something like Ringu or Ju-on, which is okay. The premise is solid. It's something that's not completely original, like an organ transplant going wrong. I think that, what's that movie where the guy gets a hand transplant and it's like a serial killer's hands? So
is that Idle Hands?
Probably. Yeah, I don't know.
From 99? I never saw that movie, but the hand detaches itself and starts killing people or something, right? Along those lines.
Something like that. Or he, his mind gets possessed by the serial killer's mind or something something about organ transplant going wrong. And seeing ghosts as well, I'd seen it before in The Sixth Sense, obviously.
Pretty comparable. There's definitely a lot inspired from The Sixth Sense, I think, just the seeing ghost aspects.
And helping them as well,
Yeah.
Not just at first being scared by them, but then finding out, oh, maybe I should help these ghosts, kind of thing. That's a very Sixth Sense. It didn't feel that original.
I'm gonna have to agree with you on that as well. I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was okay. There's a lot of scares that I have to admit feel a bit dated, and I think the movie was bordering on trying to be deep, but also trying to be very entertaining as well. I can notice that a lot in the way the film is edited. I'm going to compare it to J-horror, where a lot of the shots, they'll give the characters a lot of space to build that tension. And a lot of the horror comes from the empty space. And I think it's just a horror rule in general about dead space and kind of lingering shots. There are quite a few nicely framed shots, but they use a lot of reverse shot, and it ruins the tension a little bit. I don't know. It doesn't give time for the characters to be, I guess. And there's quite a few jump scares, but there's always music that they play that telegraph too much. A lot of horror that I like is the silence of horror. But there are a number of creepy scenes. I think the fan favorite scene is the woman licking the window. It looks a bit goofy, but
that was weird.
Yeah, it's weird. It's cool. It's a bit weird.
It's cool, yeah.
Oh, there is one really, really, really good scare in this movie, and I'm curious as to whether you probably would have spotted it.
They're talking about the background scare when they're on the train.
Yes, that's there's no attention drawn to it. There's just them on the train, and I was just sitting there just watching it, and then I just noticed it. I was like, holy shit. And then you get that sudden chill that you're like, oh fuck, that's scary. Just someone just there.
I think it's noticeable enough.
Yeah. That was probably for me the best scare in the movie, because it was just there, it just kind of stood on its own in the background.
Yeah, to me, like, it was cool. And then I was wondering if there were any more. So I did a little bit of research, and turns out that was the only background scare. Like, yeah, I mean, it's good that they don't overuse it. Like, I think the latest It movies, they have a lot of background scares to the point where it's almost overutilized. It's kind of just there so that people can just look at the background instead of watching the movie, I guess. But yeah, this, I think you're right. Like, in this film, I feel like the sound design may have let it down a little bit. I feel like maybe they were a bit too worried that the audience might get bored with, like, not enough happening.
I think they took the worst part of Western horror, which is, I think the audience is going to get bored, so I'll chuck in a scare. The first scare is the old woman. That scene to me was kind of funny. Just, I don't know, an old woman groaning.
You know, in true Dan fashion, I watched the American remake first. I watched them both today, and I decided to watch the American remake first.
As me, for the tester, as a purist, I watched the Hong Kong original first.
Well, I did it because I wanted to watch the American remake and try to guess what was different or what changes they had made from the original. And one of them that I guessed was sound design. Like, the American movie, they play a lot with sounds to the point where it's almost like you're going into a haunted house and there's just like random scare sounds all around you, just assaulting your ears and making you like spin around.
You mean like the black cloak men in the remake don't really do anything, but in the original don't really do anything, but in the remake they're like
yeah. But even like in the scene that you were talking about with the old woman, like you know, Jessica Alba's walking slowly through the hospital corridor, and like she's like spinning around because she's reacting to sounds that are all around her. And I was like, oh, this has got to be like an American remake thing. This is too silly. But then when I watched the original, it's fairly similar.
It's pretty similar.
Yeah.
There is quite a number of things similar in the remake to the original.
And I think sound design is one of them. It's like the directors felt that the film wasn't scary enough in its own merit, so they just chucked like scary sounds into the film in post.
My biggest issue with, and I guess this is both of them, is that there's not really any stakes on any of their lives. I guess I should mention Angelica Lee, who stars as Mun.
She's good.
Yeah, she's much better than Jessica Alba. She won a lot of awards when this movie came out. Like, she won the Oscars equivalent in Asia. But yeah, their characters aren't in any danger, which kind of drew that away from me. Ghosts work differently, I guess, in films in Hong Kong, where they're not super vengeful. They're kind of just wondering, you know, the idea of if your life gets cut short in an instant, you are destined to relive the same moment of death until you make peace. So that's kind of with the Buddhist belief on reincarnation, how like things go in a circle. But a lot of the movie it's kind of a reflection on the Pan-Asian experience at the time, when I guess this is like a post-Hong Kong independence film, and you can kind of see the influence of, you know, the West, which has ingrained itself. You know, you hear the doctor speak English, and you hear Mun's hesitancy to learn how to speak English because she wants to go to Vancouver. So it's pretty interesting to see that in a film, and the whole idea of using Hong Kong and Thailand, because the directors are half Thai, half Hong Kong Chinese.
Yep.
So that's kind of their identity is within the movie. And Hong Kong is kind of like the representation of like modern Western society, modern Asian Western society. And Thailand, they've used Thailand as kind of the more traditional sense.
One of my notes
yeah.
is Thailand is to Hong Kong like Mexico is to the US.
Yeah, well, that's what they did in the remake, right?
Yeah. It's kind of apt.
Yeah. Is it because like because she gets the eyes from the Thai woman's I guess Ling from I guess that's a it's not a whatever spoiler. So it's kind of like because she has her eyes, is she half Thai now? Does she have that in her, or is that just part?
No,
is she still
I
herself,
think
like
it's
with the vision?
I think it's just the she can see ghosts and hear ghosts for some reason. I didn't look much deeper into it than that because once she kind of resolves the Ling's issues, she kind of goes away. So I don't know. Like, that's another thing that
she loses her vision there. Like,
That's
is the
true
vision
as well.
like her personality, or is that Ling's? It's pretty interesting. Like the more I think about the eye, there is some pretty good stuff in there to think about. Like, I really, and I wish they delve deeper into this. Like, Ling and Mun are both outsiders in the fact that Mun is ostracized by her community when she gains her sight back, which I thought was quite interesting. Because she plays violin.
They should have played a bit more with
in
that.
the remake. It's like, oh hey, and then at the end of the movie, and I'm playing violin, and everything's gonna be all right.
Freeze frame. And then they have those they'd have those like credits like Jessica Alba went on to be first chair in the New York Symphony Orchestra. Dr. Forker went on to
Dr. Forker. I think the movie, the remake, it's shorter, but it's less efficient. In the original, it's straight away she's unraveling the bandages from the eye. In the remake, you see the Spanish building manager who looks after her or whatever, and there's a
lot more of her being blind, I think, in the American remake.
Yeah, which was kind of a criticism that I did have with the original. But then after watching the American remake, I'm like, no, actually that works better to just kind of get straight into it.
Yeah. I feel like they explain enough in the original that you're kind of like, you get it. Like when the doctor kind of holds up a stapler and he's like, what is this? And she doesn't know until she's able to touch it. Like, yeah.
I think that scene was done way better than the original. Like the scene where she's like, you don't believe me, do you? Because it's so subtextual. Because like you can see the doctor is trying to tiptoe around it, but you get it. Like you get what he's trying to say. But in the remake, he's like, it's just wrong or whatever he says. So,
he's like such an asshole. Their relationship in general is just very like one dimensional. But I feel like in the original, there is a bit. You feel like the tenderness that he has towards Mun a bit more. It comes across in their interactions and sometimes there's like lighter moments between them as well where you're like, oh, okay, they actually have, something going on. So that makes him, when he tries to help her eventually and, violates his own ethics as a doctor to get that information regarding her donor, it makes that decision a lot more understandable. Whereas in the remake, he's like, when he refuses initially, it's like, I'm like, of course he would refuse to do this. Like, she's just some random crazy lady that's asking him to break his patient-doctor confidentiality. And she, like, acts like he's in the wrong. She goes like, "Oh, I guess you hold on to your doctor's license then, you big jerk." And I'm like, okay. And then it kind of like that makes him change his mind, which is ludicrous. But anyway, yeah.
It's funny. In the car, she's like, "What made you change your mind?" And I'm just thinking the doc is just thinking, because you're a fucking Jessica Alba. Like, that's basically.
Obviously.
It's like, I mean,
have you seen yourself? Oh, I guess you've only just started seeing yourself, so you have no concept on hotness, I guess. But yeah, you're pretty hot, and that's why.
What are like the biggest differences you can think of? Like, I guess.
The biggest one is the ending, obviously.
The ending. You can really see the difference between Hollywood versus Asian, because in the original ending, there is an incident which a gas tanker explodes, and Mun, the protagonist, and Jessica Alba, I forgot her character's name, it's just Jessica Alba.
Sydney is her name.
Oh, yeah. So Jessica Alba and Mun see a premonition that this gas tanker is about to explode, and they both attempt to stop it. In the original one, Mun fails, essentially, and it costs the lives of a lot of people. And there's a fairly graphic rendition of the dead carcasses
so surprised
in the cars.
Not even like not even like fully dead people, just people like writhing around on fire as well.
Yeah. And in the remake, it's obviously a happy ending. It's funny because when I was watching the original, I was thinking, I wonder if there was a storyline where it kind of maybe paralleled Mun and the Thai girl, and maybe she was warning, and if she did save them, because like it's kind of a failure on Ling, the original Thai girl, who she wasn't really trying to save anyone, was she? I think there was fire.
She did warn them, but they didn't believe her.
But she... Oh, no, they both hanged themselves, but it's like, I'd wondered if we had followed kind of like a parallel story, and then in the end, it's like Mun does kind of get to save people instead of like Ling, and that kind of is closure. But then when I watch the American remake, I'm like, oh, nah, it's kind of lame. Like, do you think there could have been that happier ending, but if it was like executed in a different way?
Yeah. So yeah, I watched the American movie first, and the ending was like, yeah, okay, fine. But then I watched the original with the grim ending, and I was convinced that this was going to be some kind of premonition, and like the people weren't actually dead, and it was going to cut back, and she's going to be in the bus, and then she's going to save everyone. Yeah, I don't know. I was just convinced that was going to happen. And then when it didn't, I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting that they've decided to go with that. I wonder what kind of message they're going to try to push. And then her end narration, to me, was nonsensical, given the events that had taken place. Like, she was given this ability to see ghosts and even like predict something horrible was going to happen, and then she failed to prevent it, just as Lin had. But then her ending narration is talking about how she didn't feel bad about being blind because she'd seen the beauty in life and like true beauty. And I'm like, what are you even talking about? You saw a whole bunch of people get barbecued, and you're talking about the beauty of life? No, that was a horrible thing that happened. And like it was not only horrible, but it made your whole ordeal meaningless. Like, what is the point of being able to see these things if you can't do anything about it? Like, I would feel really bad about that kind of ending. So yeah, to me, like, the ending narrations for the American film and for the original film were fairly similar in their message, but because of the positive outcome of the American film, it made, like, her ending narration made more sense. So going back to your question about whether there could have been a more positive outcome for Mun. I feel like they didn't need to make it a positive outcome as long as, the message that they tried to convey at the end was clearer and more appropriate to the actual events of the film.
I made the comment about whether or not it works as a horror. I wondered if in a hypothetical, if I were to rewrite the Eye, I would do it maybe in like kind of like that tandem parallel story that you see in like the world of Kanako, or maybe even Confessions. It runs along these like two characters, because I really like that kind of stuff, and you can kind of get more of a chance to see what Ling's life was like being ostracized by her community, and then the progression of Mun being alone, being ostracized from her like violin community. I would have liked that a bit more, like the kind of because she's like getting lonelier and lonelier, and that's the theme as well, because she's kind of suffering these ghostly sightings on her own. But admittedly, I don't know, I wonder if that would be, I wouldn't really be able to pitch that because it's not really a horror movie anymore. And I guess you're pitching a horror film, so you have to like just chuck in scares. So I feel like the fact that it's a horror might have held it back. Well, like, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think in the end, to me, it fell flat as both a human drama and as a horror. Like, I know, to me, the horror genre, like, plot is always a weak point, I find. No, not always. There are obvious exceptions, but in general, I feel like, and I'm a very plot-focused person. When I watch a movie, I'm focusing first on plot and characters, and everything else is secondary to me. So that's why, like, I find it hard to get on board with most horror. But for this film, it felt like The Ring. It felt a lot like The Ring.
Well, they were taking a lot of cues from, like, the aesthetic is very The Ring. Like,
but
it's
even
very
like
J-horror.
Even the whole idea of, I've got to solve this mystery and, kind of help this person who's dead find their peace, and then that will solve everything. But then, it doesn't solve everything, and something else happens before the end of the movie, kind of thing. That whole thing is like, straight from The Ring.
You can kind of see it's like, you think something is resolved, and that's when in the original it's like she's the grandma or the mother of Ling accepts her daughter's suicide. In the remake, it's like they just get rid of the mother and like make it just to get Alva's moment instead. It's like, what happened to the mum? Oh, she's dead. Just dies, and it doesn't make sense because she's like, she does this every night. But like, is the daughter like choking the mum every night because it was like the black hooded guy?
No, it was just an ill-timed heart attack, I think.
Yeah, I think so. But she's like, she does this every. So okay, so it was just it was just a heart attack.
Yeah, it's just a bad night. It was just like one too many hamburgers, probably. But
one too many bottles of Coke.
But yeah, I don't know, like, I feel like a lot could have been solved if they either committed to a grim ending, like if they committed fully to that grim ending, or I don't know. I just feel like the message was a bit unclear, and the tone was a bit unclear. You
didn't really buy it,
and maybe if they sprinkled a few like bits throughout the film where she kind of sees that this isn't like entirely a bad thing that's happening to her, but most of it was her. It needed
more character moments. I think that's the issue. There's too many scares. Because you said you're a plot person. I really like character-driven movies. So lots of like lingering moments with characters just meandering and like doing the everyday stuff, which is why I like the violin sort of subplot, which it doesn't really get elaborated on. I felt like it was a missed opportunity because you don't get a chance to explore that part of her psyche. It's just like, I feel a bit bad for being like, oh, I'm a little bit bullied or something like that.
I think another missed opportunity was her not being able to trust her eyes. They did a little bit in the original. There's a bit where she's kind of talking to her violin coach or whatever, and then somebody kind of appears in the background, and it's like a kind of weird looking bloke. He's got like white hair. Like a young bloke with white hair, and she kind of stares at him, like, and as the audience, you're kind of thinking, is that guy a real person, or because he looks pretty weird, and but then he turns out to be a real person.
He's a real guy.
Who's I think
they did that. They did that once in the remake. I don't remember.
I don't remember it happening in the remake. There is a moment.
I think there is. I can't pinpoint it because. I'd be honest, I was watching it on one monitor and, like, I don't know, reading the news or something, because I was like, it's basically the same movie, but with less of the stuff that made the original interesting and worse acting. And the acting is a huge part of it as well, because, you know, a lot of the movie is the actress reacting to something that she sees. So, like, they really have to have a good face for reactions, and I mean, Jessica Alba is not... That's not her strong suit, I think. She's not the best actress. And look, back in the fucking early thousands, like, Jessica Alba, like, I idolized that woman. And I was like, man, I watched Dark Angel. I didn't watch Honey, but I was, like, keeping my eye out for anything Jessica Alba.
Yeah.
And then when people were saying, like, she's not a good actress, like, nah, man, she's actually quite good in... But then over the years, you know, it's like, oh, yeah, she probably... wasn't the best actress.
Yeah, you come to accept. I'm sure she's come to accept it. She seems nice though. So. She seems really nice, and I think maybe even that niceness kind of hurts.
I think so. Yeah.
Especially in this role, like she's just so sweet in this film that it kind of like makes it hard to buy any scene where she's terrified or angry. You know, it's like I don't know. But yeah.
So it's obviously original over the remake for you? Or what do you reckon? For me, I mean, people would probably assume, and you'd assume correct, that I'd prefer the original over the remake.
The audience score is definitely on the original side. I don't know. To me, they were both kind of but and like it is like in true Asian horror American remake fashion, it is like plot for plot kind of thing until the ending. Like it is just it's very it sticks very closely to the plot of the original, and yeah, like I said, the sound design as well, like the things that I thought would be different in the American remake were not actually different upon watching the original, which I was a bit surprised by. But yeah, probably the changes they did make, like the shadowy figures being all jump scary and looking a bit like Voldemort. But yeah, like, so they're definitely, the two films are made with different audiences in mind. But that said, yeah, they're pretty close. But yeah, just the changes that are made, you know, when I look at it from an objective point of view, I see why those decisions were made. Like, obviously, the ending change is because Western audiences prefer a more positive ending. I mean, the acting is better in the original, and I think that kind of is where the remake falls down, like, in a big way, because, like, the aforementioned relationship between Jessica Alba and the Doctor in the American remake is just nothing. It's like a nothing relationship, because the Doctor is just an asshole to her, and then for some reason he comes around to her side of the story.
Because it's Jessica Alba.
Yeah, because Jessica Alba.
He was just sitting in his office like, wait a minute, it's Jessica Alba. I was like, yeah, I'll help you out.
Yeah, but yeah, the original is probably better. Who am I to argue with everyone? But yeah, to me, they're okay. Both films are okay. I wouldn't watch both.
Yeah.
I would pick one. Whatever you prefer. I feel like if you prefer the American remakes in general, watch the American remake. If you're a purist like Thavy, watch the original.
But there are some remakes that are actually not bad. which I guess we'll talk about next time.
All right. Well, yeah. Good luck with your surgery, Thavy. I hope.
Oh yeah, that's right. I should be in bed.
You're either in bed or you're desperately trying to track down the donor that you got the corneas from because you've begun to see ghosts.
I'll start seeing ghosts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope I don't see ghosts because that'd be a bit annoying.
I hope if you do, that they're all tongues. I hope that you see some weird licking of things, not boring ghosts. Not like Voldemort
You want me to see
jumping at you.
You want me to see the starling Voldemort goes?
Yeah.
It's pretty funny. I'm just thinking about it now. It kind of makes me laugh. And then there's one where she takes the cancer girl.
Yeah.
She's like, all right.
Well, I'm sure it'll be fine. All right.
Yeah.
And if not, this has been Two Asian Blokes.
I could also be dead as well. You can just get booed to be the next Asian bloke.
We got plenty waiting in the wings.
You got plenty of Asian blokes around Australia.
All right, guys, thank you for listening. Tell us what you think about The Eye, if you've seen either of them. Did our analysis make you want to watch either of them? Do you think Jessica Alba is a better actress than we think? Let us know. Send in your comments. You can find us at twoasianblokes@gmail.com, or you can join our Facebook group and be part of the discussion. Thank you as always for listening, guys.
See you guys.
Bye.